Continuing on in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5. Last week we started looking at this passage. We looked at Jesus' view of the law, that he had a high view of the law. I shouldn't say he has a high view of the law. The law is essential. It's vital to us. The law is our schoolmaster. Did I fade out there for a second? The law is our schoolmaster, and it tells us where we are. It tells us where we are in relationship with God as how we're living. And so we looked at that. We saw that what practical righteousness looks like in the Christian life, and that our life as Christians, it's essential that we live lives of reconciliation. Our life, we're called, the Bible tells us we're called to the ministry of reconciliation, that we're to reconcile with people, we're to help people reconcile. And predominantly, and first and foremost, we need to reconcile people with God by sharing the gospel. This morning, we're going to look at some different ways that Jesus raised the bar on the law, what the law really means. And when I say he raised the bar, it's not that he actually changed anything, but he reveals to us how high that bar of the law really is. And you might ask, well, why is that so important? Just briefly, keep your finger in there in Matthew chapter 5, but turn to James chapter 2. James chapter 2. In the beginning of James chapter 2, we see that James talking about discrimination, having respect of persons. And when we do that, we are committing blasphemy. But verse 10, he says, "For whosoever shall keep the whole law, and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all." So if you keep 9 of the 10 commandments, but you break one commandment, he says you're guilty of all. Verse 11 says, "For he that saith, do not commit adultery, also said, do not kill. Now if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law." He said, listen, if you break one law, you've broken the whole law. You see, we look at the 10 commandments as 10 individual things, but they're all equally important. We have a tendency, and if I were to ask for a raise of hands, I will not, but if I ask you for a raise of hands, said, who thinks that stealing is not as bad as murder? Most of us would raise our hands saying, no, I'd rather have a thief than a murderer. And yet, God says if you offend in one point, you've broken the entirety of the law. Trying to keep myself a little hydrated today so I don't have a coughing fit at the end of the service today. But well, how does that work? Because our minds just have a tendency to scale things, don't we? You know, I mean, some of these things, not that keeping the Sabbath, you know, having that day of rest, not that big of a priority. It's way, you know, working 7 days a week is way better than murder or stealing or lying, is kind of how we would look at that. Don't we have a tendency to do that? But here's the thing. And I thought about doing this. I thought about buying a fruit tree and putting it right here in the pot. But I decided not to do that. Somebody would probably have a heart attack if dirt was spilled. But if I had a fruit tree here, And anyone here like peaches? Let's say I had a peach tree. And you looked at that tree and said, oh, I really want some of those peaches. Those peaches look so good. Peaches just make my life better. I like peaches. I love peach tea. It's my favorite beverage. And so I got a peach tree so I could make some peach tea. But then I looked at it, it's like, I don't like the way the roots look. So I'm just going to cut away some of those roots because they don't look good. What would happen to my peach tree? It would die, probably. At minimum, I would stun its growth, right? Say, well, what is thinking that not keeping the Sabbath is not as bad as murder? What does that have to do with the roots of a tree? Well, here's the thing: is the root of the law is God's holiness. The root of the law is God's righteousness. The root of the law is God's justice. And when we take away from the law, when we say, that's not a big deal, when somebody commits a sin, we say, that's not a big deal. Or when we commit a sin, we say, that's not a big deal. What we have done is we've in essence said, God's not that holy. God's not that righteous. God's not that just. It's all part of the same tree, but the roots are right there. We can't cut away part of the tree and expect the tree to grow and to do well. By cutting away part of the tree, we're in essence cutting away the roots. We're removing God's holiness. We don't like to talk about God's holiness, do we? We don't like to talk about his righteousness. We have a tendency to minimize God's holiness and God's righteousness. We sit there and say, well, using God's name, we talked about using God's name in vain in Sunday school today, so it's kind of in my mind. We say, well, using God's name in vain, that's a big deal. We shouldn't do that. I think we would probably all agree with that God's name is not a curse word. But then we turn around and we use other forms of foul language. And we say, well, it's not that big of a deal. But the same God that says, thou shalt not use the name of the Lord thy God in vain, is the same God who says, swear not by anything in heaven, anything in earth, and anything under the earth. You see, it all comes down to the Spirit, and God's holiness, his righteousness, his justice, has less to do with the things we do and more to do with what's inside of us. See, all these sins come from inside of us. There are what we do, the things that are outside of us, that just reveals the inside of us. So when we use bad language, we're revealing the filth inside of us. When we steal, we're revealing the filth inside of us. When we just whatever it is, using, we're revealing that filth in us that says, listen, I have violated God's commandments. I've violated God's law. And because we have violated God's law, we stand guilty. But here's the thing, is God's law is much sterner, much stricter than what we give it credit for. Turn back to Matthew chapter 20. Matthew chapter 20. And look at, we ended with verse 20 where it said, for I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter the kingdom of heaven. It says your righteousness has to be more than the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees. And that confused the people because it was a hard thing, because they were considered the upper crust, the most righteous. They were considered the spiritual ones in the nation of Israel. So he goes on, and now he's going to go through not all of the commandments, but he's going to go through some of the commandments and reveal how we have all violated each of these commandments. In verse 21, he says, ye have heard that it was said by them of all old time, thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. He said, you've heard from old times, from way back when, the commandment, thou shalt not kill. Don't commit murder. That word kill there means to murder. It's an unrighteous killing. It's not talking about a government executing a criminal. It's not talking about self-defense, and if you kill someone in self-defense, that's not what it's talking about. The word is to murder, meaning an unrighteous, unjustified killing of an innocent human being. He said, you've heard from way back when, from old days, this has been passed on, thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. If you murder, there's a judgment coming. We all know that, don't we? It was that way in Israel. It's been that way since Cain murdered Abel. There's a judgment coming. He says, but I say unto you, verse 22, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause, shall be in danger of the judgment. He says, listen, this judgment for murder, whatever that judgment is, and we know what the judgment for God's judgment for murder is, an eternity in hell, right? An unrepentant sinner, doesn't matter, they're going to hell. He says, whoever, that judgment, that is the same judgment that a person who is angry with his brother for no reason. Angry with a brother without a cause. That means you're mad at someone for no good reason. I'd ask for a show of hands, and if we're all honest, we would all raise our hands, that have you ever been mad at somebody and not had really a good reason for it? We've all done that. And Jesus says, listen, if you're mad at somebody for no reason at all, no good reason, you're guilty of murder. You get the same judgment as a murderer. That is considered murder in your heart already. He says, not only that, he says, he'll be in danger of judgment, and whosoever shall say to his brother, Raca. He says, that means that you hold them in utter contempt. Have you ever told someone in one way or another that you hold them in utter contempt? I don't like you. I'll never like you. You are a disgusting human being. Have you said something like that to someone? Have you thought something like that about someone? Let's raise that bar. He says, listen, if that's what you've said, you're in danger of the council, meaning you're in danger of being brought forth to a tribunal to be tried for some wickedness you have committed. And it says, whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. He says, if you call someone a fool, have we ever called anyone a fool? I'm pretty sure we all have. If you haven't done it as an adult, I'm reasonably sure you called somebody a fool in junior high or high school, or middle school and high school, maybe even elementary school. But most of us have even done that as an adult. Listen, what right do I have to judge somebody as a fool? I don't. Now, I can look at God's word, and God's word says the fool has said in his heart there is no God, and say if you're an atheist and you don't think there's a God, God says you're a fool. But that's not my judgment. I can't see what's in their heart. That's what God says. If God says you're a fool, we know that you're a fool. That's a fact. If I call you a fool, that's an opinion. But if God calls you a fool, that's a fact. And so he says, listen, you're in danger of hellfire. Wow. You know what? All those things sound like the same judgment you get for being a murderer, doesn't it? And how many of us have committed this sin? We all have. You see, the truth is that in our hearts, as unregenerate human beings, that if we've never been saved, we are in our core murderers. We just haven't done the act yet, necessarily. Most people don't have the character to stick with a moral standard. Do you know that? You see it all the time. Anyone here watch Survivor? Watch reality competitions? And how many times have you heard somebody say, that's not who I am in the real world, but this is a game? It's kind of how you are in the real world, because you're doing that to get financial gain, and you're working in this area where it's socially acceptable to do that. And so instead of holding to a standard and demonstrating good character, you're sitting there saying, the world sets my standards for my character, and I'm still good character if I lie, cheat, and steal to win this game. Because it's just a game. You see, the bar isn't the actions that we do. The bar is in our heart. That's where we miss the bar. We may clear the bar in our actions. We may never actually commit murder. Maybe you've never actually stolen anything. Maybe you've never physically committed adultery. But where's your heart? Because that's where the sin resides. The sin doesn't reside in your hand. It doesn't reside in your eyes. It doesn't reside in your ears. It doesn't reside in your feet. It resides in your heart. And it is your heart that will condemn you. See, we've all committed sins that are basically equivalent to murder in God's eyes. We've all committed that. We looked at verses 23 through 26 last week, so we're going to skip down to verse 27. Let's take a look at adultery. It says, ye have heard that it has been said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. Here it is, old time again. We know from the centuries, we know from the law, we know all the way back to Moses when he was on Mount Sinai and he brought those stone tablets down, that the law says, thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not commit sexual immorality. You will not have sexual relations outside of marriage. And in case you're wondering what would be considered a sexual relationship, just think about what you would consider to be cheating if you're married or if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Would you consider it cheating if they kissed someone else? If they're walking down the street holding hands with someone else? There's that physical aspect there that we consider cheating. So let's just look at what the Bible says about adultery, though. You've heard it said, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery in her heart, with her in his heart. Say, if you look at a woman, It says not just look at a woman and lust, but look at a woman to lust after her. This is intentional. This isn't driving down the road and you see some billboard with a bikini-clad woman, or for women, if you're driving down the road and you see a billboard with a half-naked man showing off all his muscles, and you see that, it's like, oh, now I committed sin. No, this is like seeing it and just keep looking. You're intentionally looking at it. You can't not see it when you're driving, can you? Unless you put a blindfold on. But I would venture to say it's a bad idea to wear a blindfold when you're driving. But you cannot stare at it, right? You can't avoid seeing people who are dressed immodestly at the mall in the summer, but you don't have to stare. And so it said, listen, if you look at a person to lust after them, I'm just going to generalize this because it applies to men and women both. If you're looking at somebody with the intention of lusting after them, you committed adultery, you committed sexual immorality in your heart already. He says, if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, but not that thy whole body shall be cast into hell. He said, listen, if your eye offends you, rip it out. Now, this is not Jesus telling us that we should all go blind because we don't want to see anything. This is telling us the severity, how bad this is. That this sin of adultery in our hearts, just the act of staring to lust after someone, this is adultery. And what's the penalty for adultery? If you look at the law and you look at the penalty for adultery, that was the law that was given to Israel, it was the exact same penalty, a part of you, than to burn forever. In verse 30, and if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. So if you can't keep your hands to yourself, you're better off cutting them off. I'm not saying cut off your hands. It's just, again, an illustration of how severe this is. You're better off without them if you can't keep your hands to yourself. As has been said, it's been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. He says, if you want to put your wife away, if you want to get rid of her, he said, in old times it was said, give her a writ of divorcement, give her a writing of divorcement, get a divorce from her. This was actually in the law. But Jesus revealed to us that was only given because man's heart is hard. What's best is reconciliation. Again, we saw that last week, is to be reconciled. He said, whosoever shall put away he said, the law says if you want to put your wife away, give her a writing of divorcement. He says, but I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, save him for the cause of fornication, causes her to commit adultery. If you get divorced for a reason other than fornication, other than sexual immorality, he says, you're causing them to commit adultery. You're causing them to commit sexual immorality, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committeth adultery. If you marry someone who's divorced, Jesus says, you're committing adultery. You see, the idea of adultery, it's so much more all-encompassing than what we think it is. It is any sexual contact with anyone that you're not married to. And why would it be adultery? Why would it be adultery if they're divorced? Because doesn't divorce dissolve the union? Isn't that what divorce is for? To dissolve this marriage union. Well, let me ask you this. What vow did you make before God when you got married? For better, for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. When we do that, and we proclaim God when we're giving these vows. See, all this stuff is adultery that we don't really think of as adultery. We've created a society where sexual immorality, as long as neither person is married, is not considered evil. It's not considered bad, and yet God says, listen, it's adultery, it's sexual immorality. It is bad, it is wicked, and the penalty for that wickedness is death. Look at verse 33, looking at, this is a commandment. This is one of the commandments. It says, thou shalt not, the commandment says, thou shalt not bear false witness. We also, shorten it to thou shalt not lie. Lying is bearing a false witness, is saying something that is true when it's not. But verse 33 says, again, ye have heard it said by them of old time, back in the day, in the olden days, when the law was given, thou shalt not forswear thyself, or thou shalt not lie. That's what forswearing is. It means to lie, to not keep your word. But shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. He said, listen, the law says thou shalt not forswear thyself. That you're to keep your word. If you say something and you don't keep it, you lied. If you say, I'll be there, and you're not there, you lied. If you say you can use this, and then you decide, no, you can't because it's inconvenient, or you decided that you want to use it at the same time, but you already told someone they could use it, you lied. You forswore yourself. You did not keep your word. He says, but you shall perform unto the Lord thine oaths. If you say you're going to do it, he says, do it. That's what the law says. That's what the law requires. He says, but I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. He said, don't swear by heaven. Don't swear because it's God's throne. It's a holy place. He said, don't swear by the earth, because the earth is his footstool. It's a holy place. He says, neither by Jerusalem. Don't swear by Jerusalem. That was kind of what they would do. They would be like, that was the where the throne was. That was where the king lived. That was their capital city, and so it'd be something that they would use. It's almost like, have you ever heard somebody say, I swear on my mother's grave. I swear by my mom, if I'm lying, let my kids die, or something weird like that. People say all kinds of things like that. He says, don't do that. You see, God intends us to be people of our word. Not that we shouldn't make promises. Does making a promise have a more significant impact than just saying we'll do it? I mean, if somebody says, I promise this, do you expect them to do it? And if they don't say, I promise, but I'll do this, do you expect them to do it? You don't know if they're going to do it, because we look at it, it's like, well, they promised, and a promise is really important. It's important to keep your promises, and God says, no, it's not important to keep your promises, it's important to keep your word. If you say you're going to do it, if you say you're going to be there, if you say you're committing to this, you're committing to that, then you should do it. Nothing should stop you. It shouldn't be stopped because, well, it's just not convenient for me now. Something came up and I didn't expect it. God expects us to keep our word. Turn to Psalm 15. Just 5 verses. It says, Lord, this is a Psalm of David. So this is a Psalm David wrote. Don't know if he wrote it when he was a shepherd or when he was a king. But he wrote this Psalm inspired by the Holy Spirit as he's writing this. He says, Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? He that walketh uprightly and worketh righteousness and speaketh the truth in his heart. He says, who's going to abide at the tabernacle? Who's going to dwell on your holy hill and your holy place? He that walks uprightly, this man, this person of integrity, who works righteousness, he does righteously, and speaketh the truth from his heart. He speaks truth, and it's not just truth because he has to, it's truth that's in him, that comes out of him. He that backbiteth not with his tongue, who doesn't stab people in the back with his tongue, who doesn't gossip, nor doeth evil to his neighbor, the person who doesn't seek to do harm to his neighbor, nor taketh up a reproach against his neighbor, who doesn't build a case against his neighbor, who isn't looking for offense by his neighbor, in whose eyes a vile person is contemned. He says, in the eyes of the person who this disgusting person, he is, excuse me, he doesn't have a tolerance for them. He holds them in contempt because they are disgusting. He says, but he honoreth them that fear the Lord. He says, God honors those who fear God, who fear him. And then look at the next phrase, he that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. This person who's going to abide with God, who's going to dwell with him, who's going to have this vital relationship with him, who's going to have this place of honor, he's a person, all these things, he says, he that swears to his own hurt. This is a person who says, I'll do it, and does it even if it hurts them to do it. How many times have you had somebody who said, well, I'll do this, and then they can't say, well, I can't do that, it's going to cost me too much money. I said I'd do it, but family came in. I said I'd do it, but an opportunity for more hours at work came up. I said I'd do it, but somebody else needs my help more. I said I'd do it, but this person who's going to be honored by God is a person who keeps his word even when it hurts. Even when it costs them more than they expected. Because a lot of times it costs us more than we expect. Because we can't see the future. We think things are going to go a certain way and they go the other way. But they said, listen, I'm going to keep my word. This is what it means. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not lie. That means you keep your word. Jesus told us that our yea should be yea and our nay should be yea. We should say yes or we should say no. And when we say yes, we should keep it. And when we say no, we should keep it. And yeah, that's a hard standard, isn't it? Because we have a tendency, we all do. When I say we, I'm including me, by the way. We have a tendency to decide not to do what we say we're going to do because it's inconvenient, because it's uncomfortable. We all do it. Every person I've ever met has done this. And then just to wrap up that whole psalm, he that pursueth putteth not out his money to usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent. The person who loans money but doesn't charge interest. They just loan it out of the goodness of their heart. He that doesn't take a reward, who doesn't turn in innocent people for financial gain. He that doeth these things shall never be moved. This is stability there. This is the stability that God provides us. So listen, we need to be people of our words. In fact, keeping our word is so important. We're not going to go there, but just write this down. Joshua chapter 9. In Joshua chapter 9, Joshua is in the middle of conquering the promised land. And God has told them to chase out all the inhabitants of the land. Some of the cities there to wipe them out. They were so wicked that the only way to keep them from having evil influence on Israel was to completely destroy them. Men, women, children, animals, everything. But there was no inhabitant in the promised land that they were not to remove. They were not to go to war with. They were to go to war with all of them and get them out of the land, whether they had to be killed or they chased them away. And so, as Israel's conquering the promised land, some of the cities are starting to realize, wow, this is crazy. This small country, they're just taking all these cities. They took down Jericho. Jericho was considered to be an impregnable city. And they tore the walls down. And they're seeing all these victories that Israel's amassing. And so the Gibeonites come up with a plan. The king of Gibeon comes up with a plan. He gets a couple of people and some spies. And he says, I want you to wear old, dirty, ripped up clothes that look like you've been traveling for a long time. And I want you to have like wore out sandals. And I want you to have some old food. In fact, I want your bread to be moldy so it looks like you've been traveling for a long time. I want you to go to Israel and I want you to make a treaty with them. Do not tell them who you are. And so these Gibeonites came to Joshua looking like they've traveled a long distance, a distance so long that they couldn't possibly be residents of the promised land. And so they came to Joshua, and Joshua felt bad for them, and he fed them, and he gave them new clothes, and they made a treaty, a mutual defense pact. And then these guys went on their way, went back home. And when they got to Gibeon, they found out that these men, because they sent them out, say, we have a treaty with you. You can't attack us. Now they deceived Joshua into signing this treaty. And we would probably look at that and we would say, you know what? They acted deceptively. And because they acted deceptively, that treaty is null and void. That's how we would respond, isn't it? But Joshua had such a high view of God and had such a high view of God's word that he said, I have to keep my word. So he told them, like, we're not going to attack you, but this is what's going to happen. You are going to become our slaves. You're our servants now. We'll protect you, but you work for us now. But he didn't do what God said to do because he couldn't do what God said to do because he gave his word. And that's why God tells us, and again in the book of James, I believe, where he says, he tells us that, you know what, instead of saying we'll do this because we don't know what tomorrow brings, we should say, if the Lord allows, we'll do it. And what that means is that if I'm able to do it, if God has opened the doors for me to do this, I will do it. It doesn't mean that, well, if God opens the doors, then it doesn't cost me any money, I'll do it. It doesn't cost me anything, I'll do it. It means I will do it if God allows me to do it. Enables me. That there's no excuse except God providentially stopped me from doing it. And so, you know, that's the standard that God has for us. That's how he wants us to live, to live by our word. That whatever we say, we'll do. And so we have to be careful about what we say. Look at verse 38. It says, you have heard it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's like, that's in the law too, by the way. Not in the Ten Commandments, but it's in the law. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That, by the way, is in the context not of two people fighting and one of them loses an eye, but two people fighting and a pregnant woman being injured and the baby is injured. If that baby loses an eye, then whoever caused that lost eye should lose their eye. If the baby loses whatever injury the baby has, they should get that. The person should receive that same injury. This is really about the eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Is not about revenge so much as it's about justice for the unborn child. So if you ever want to know, is abortion murder? Yeah. Because guess what? If that unborn child died, then the person who caused the death had the death penalty called upon them in the law. It says, but I say to you that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, let him go with him twain. Give him that asketh thee from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. He says, listen, this is all about grace and mercy in our lives. That these are integral parts of the Christian life. These are integral parts of being a follower of Jesus Christ, that we need to be people of grace and mercy. Vengeance has no part in the Christian life. There's no getting even for us. And in fact, because what this is in the Romans, when they had a conquered people, the soldiers could come and pick any person they wanted. Man, woman, child, didn't matter. And if they didn't want to carry their pack anymore, they could give that person, they could force that person to carry that pack up to 1 mile. And Jesus said, well, if they have to carry the pack 1 mile, carry it a second mile for them. Show them some grace. He says, if they smite you, if they slap you across the face, let them slap the other side too. This isn't talking about that we can't defend ourselves. But vengeance has no part in our lives. I mean, I get it. You know, if somebody does something to one of my kids, every part of me screams, take them down. I mean, is that how you feel, men? Like, ladies, some of you ladies might feel that way, some of you might not feel that way. But as a man, as a husband, as a father, if somebody messes with my children, I want to take them down. But God says, no, that's not how you should live. We still need to be the protectors, but we only do so much as we need to do. No more. He says, if man sue you to get your coat, say, let him have your cloak also. Give them more than they sue you for. These are hard things. But what he's trying to tell us is like, listen, we need to live by grace. We need to live graceful lives, gracious and merciful. He says to give to him that asks you. If a brother asks you for something, give it to him. You know, that's why God gave us stuff. God gave us stuff as believers. He gives us stuff so that we can help each other. That's part of the function of the church, is to help each other. And it says, and him that would borrow from thee, turn not away. If they want to borrow something, they say, listen, I'll pay you back. Give them a loan. Be gracious, be merciful. Go above and beyond. That's what he calls us to do. Then verse 43 through the end of the chapter, we see an extension of this, that love is the intended manner of our lives. We should live our lives in a loving way. It says, ye have heard that it has been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. That sounds logical, right? Love your neighbor, hate your enemy. Do we hate our enemies? We probably do. That's why they're enemies. That's normal. That's natural. That's the way we are built. That's the way sin has made us. So that we love those people who love us, who take care of us, who show us grace and mercy and support us. And in this day and age, it's like we love people who agree with us and we hate people who don't agree with us. He says, you've heard it said that you love your neighbor and hate your enemy. He says, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. He says, listen, I'm not telling you, don't hate your enemies. I'm not telling you that you need to hate your enemies. In fact, I'm telling you the exact opposite. If they curse you, you bless them. If they hate you, do good to them. Boy, that just rubs us the wrong way, doesn't it? I don't want to do good to somebody who hates me. I mean, if we're being really honest, if somebody hates us, we probably want to slap them around a little bit. That's our natural human fallen reaction. But he says, no, you love them. You do good for them. He says, if they abuse you, despitefully use you, that means they abuse you. If they abuse you, pray for them. How much time do we spend praying for our enemies? He says, not just those who abuse you, but those who persecute you. That's stepping it up a level. You pray for them, you love them, you help them, you bless them. Why? He says that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. He says, so that you can be a child of God, so that you can reveal to them that you are different. You're a child of the King. You're a child of the Creator. How would our lives go? Because the truth is, we all start off as enemies of God. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, say, well, no, I've always loved God. You haven't always loved God. In fact, you don't always love God now. But how would our lives have gone if God said, okay, you're my enemy, and I'm going to get even with you? Use my name in vain? Crush. You stole something? Slap. You know, whatever it is, and if he took you and he punished you for every single sin you ever committed, well, that's what we call hell. But if he did it here on this earth and he just slapped us every time we did something wrong, boy, that would be rough, wouldn't it? But he says, no, you need to be like your Father in heaven. You need to show grace. You need to show mercy. That's what shows that you're a Christian. He says, for he maketh the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sendeth the rain on the just and the unjust. He says, the sun rises, and it shines for the good and the evil. The rain comes down, and it pours down on the just and the unjust. Listen, none of us is walking out of here, if it's not raining right now, but if it's pouring down rain like it was earlier, none of us would be getting to our cars dry. You know, it's not like in the cartoons, the comic strips and newspaper, where this person is just so good that it's just breaking the rain right above them, and they just walk wherever they want, and they're completely dry. That's not the way life works. We all go through trials. We all go through tribulations. We all respond differently. Some people love the rain. I would mention there's some people here that love the rain. They just love to hear the pitter-patter of the rain falling on the roof. They like the humidity. It feels refreshing on their skin. And then you have people like me. I don't want to get wet in my clothes. I don't like it. I don't like my clothes sticking to my body because it's pouring down rain like Niagara Falls. I don't like it. I don't respond well to it. But it happens to everyone. And there's a saying that there but by the grace of God go I. Like, listen, that person that's your enemy, that could be you. In fact, that probably was you to someone else. And maybe by you showing grace. I was led to Christ. I came to Christ. I did repent of my sins. I knew I was a sinner. But I came to Christ because people who should have been an enemy to me because I was responsible for the death of their son took me in as family and loved me. They showed me grace and mercy. And it took 3 years of that for me to realize that if people can do that for me, God can too. I knew I was a sinner for a long time. I knew Jesus died on the cross and shed his blood for me, and he was buried and he rose again on the third day so that I could be saved from my sin. But I could not believe that God would do that for me. I didn't believe it was available to me because I knew how reprehensible I was. And that that no one could show mercy like that. That's what I believed. And I believed that until this family took me in as a son, as if I were their son. I still have my family. And they took me in and showed me mercy and love and kindness in spite of the fact that their son was dead because of me. And that showed me that if they can do that, if a human being can do that, then God can do that too. People tell me, oh, Mike, you need to get over that. I can't get over it. I don't want to get over it. I don't want to forget where I came from because if I forget where I came from, I will forget how merciful and gracious God is. And I can't afford to lose that. Because if I lose that, I'm going to be a totally different person, a person that I don't want to be. He says, for if we love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? Listen, publicans were considered the worst of the sinners. They're tax collectors. Nobody likes the IRS, right? He says, even the publicans, even the worst of sinners, love people who love them. There is nothing remarkable about loving someone who loves you. Nothing. He says, and if you salute your brethren only, if you only greet your brothers, if you only greet the people that you know, what more do you than others? How much better are you than anyone else? Are you doing any more than anyone else? Who doesn't greet the people they know? He says, be ye therefore perfect. He says, do not even the publicans do so. Even the publicans do that. He says, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. He says, be perfect. Be fully mature. The mature response is the Christian response. The mature response is what Jesus told us to do, to show grace, mercy, love. To greet people, whoever they are. To not judge people based on how they look. We have a tendency to do that too, don't we? I mean, if you were to think back in your life and think of, have you ever seen somebody that you looked at and you said, well, I'm not giving the gospel to that person? Haven't we at times decided this person deserves to hear the gospel and that person doesn't? See, that's not the Christian way. That's not the life of a Christ follower, a disciple of Christ. Jesus is telling us, listen, God showed you mercy. God showed you grace. God forgave you. The fact of the matter is the sins we committed against the Father are so much worse than any sin anyone's committed to us. The sins that we commit against the Father are worse than every sin everyone else has ever committed against us. But God forgave us. God shows us mercy. God shows us grace. And we need to do that too. Listen, you're not better than an adulterer because you're an adulterer too. You're not better than a liar because you're a liar too. You're not better than a murderer because you're a murderer too. You're not better than any of these people because you've committed the same sins in your very heart, even if you haven't done it physically. Let's pray.